There is a number of cases now around that event, including 3 of our cases down here in Wellington who had been at that event in Auckland.
If you look at the time, they've said it's a site of interest. It's over a 6-hour period. So many of our people come together for Sunday school. They'll have their service and then they'll stay on for lunch and fellowship afterwards. So you'll understand that there'll be some very concerned and anxious families at the moment.
This nearby church has been through it before with positive cases this time last year.
This variant, the Delta variant, I think it's bringing another a level of uncertainty to our people. We have to provide the information as soon as possible so that we can we'll take away that fear.
The Assemblies of God Mangere Church is just one of a number of possible super spreader locations.
We are seeing more large events and more large gatherings in this than in any of the outbreaks that we've dealt with before. And so that is meaning we've got many more contacts than we have before. That, of course, does put the system under pressure.
More than 8,000 contacts have been identified and that number's still growing. Thousands again lining up to be tested today. These queues at the pop-up site in Warkworth. There are no known cases in the area, but COVID has been found in the wastewater.
We thought we would come through because we work in a business and lots of people from Auckland come to see us.
Well, I've got a bit of a snuffle and a sinus headache, so when I found out that they'd found something in Warkworth, I thought I'd better get tested.
The very fact that we don't know who they are, in that we haven't had a positive swab, is actually more concerning because it could be anybody.
Kiwis nationwide on alert.
A lot more people wearing masks.
Yes, we've been running, so that's why we're not, but usually we would be.
It's vital that we just do our part.
It's early days to say that we're definitely out of the woods in the South Island.
There's bound to be cases down here eventually.
This time with Delta, I think people are more worried.
Doing all they can to keep themselves safe while still enjoying the weekend.
And Laura joins us now. Kia ora, Laura. A development today in the investigation into the origins of this outbreak, the traveller from Australia.
Yeah, that New South Wales returnee is still the most likely source. And after reviewing CCTV footage, contact tracers are working with police to track down 3 members of the public who used a public walkway at the same time that traveller was moving into the facility, which is not too far behind me. They want to find out if they could be connected and part of this outbreak. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins also said today that staff in the MIQ, it's been ruled out that they could be the cause of transmission into the community. Wendy.
Laura James in Auckland, Ngā mihi. Or scanning or signing in is set to become mandatory for most businesses and events in an effort to boost contact tracing. It will come into force 7 days after the next change in alert levels. Kristen Hall has reaction.
The message is to scan, 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 but the commitment has been mixed.
I do it all the time, and it's occasionally I forget.
Just started up again, yeah.
Dare I say it, pretty slack. But this has really given me and my family a wake-up call.
Now there'll be no excuses.
So it will become mandatory to make a record of where you have been and the sorts of places where people gather consistently and in large numbers.
That includes places like cafes, restaurants, bars and concerts, as well as barbers, healthcare facilities and libraries. It doesn't include supermarkets, dairies or other retail stores.
The obligation will be on the person responsible for the place or the gathering to ensure that people scan or sign in.
The move's been welcomed by experts who've been pushing to improve contact tracing.
But if we can get 60 to 80% of adults participating in digital contact tracing, then we could be having a significant impact in the order of 20 or 30% on the spread of the virus.
But some business owners have concerns around how it will work, like this cafe and roastery owner.
We can't police everyone, unfortunately, and I would not expect my staff to get in confrontation with a customer to actually there, because you have a lot of young kids working in the hospitality trade and they could be only 17, 18-year-olds.
If you look at the mandatory masking issue, even though we're at alert level 4, that's already created problems with people not wanting to do it.
There are calls for businesses to provide ballot boxes for those who have to write down their details.
That basically helps protect their privacy. It stops anybody else from being able to go through that list and seeing the details of the people who have been to that venue.
Kiwis we spoke to are on board with the new rules.
I do it, so everyone should.
I think that's excellent. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so easy
Just do it.
The test now to see if we can follow them.
And Kristen is live in Wellington for us now. Good evening, Kristen. The new rules, was this brought about by the current outbreak?
Kia ora, Wendy. No, Minister Hipkins said today that this announcement was actually scheduled for Wednesday, but because that ended up being our first full day of lockdown, this announcement was delayed by a little bit, but it's obviously been being worked on for a while. One thing that is still being ironed out, though, is the fines that people could face for not scanning or signing in or failing to enforce that. Currently, if you break the rules under the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act, the fines range from $300 to $1,000, but the government has signalled that they are reviewing the penalties, so those figures could change.
And Kristen, do we know why supermarkets and retail outlets haven't been included in this?
Yeah, some people might be a bit confused by this. Obviously, some retail outlets could attract large numbers of people. The government said that they did consider including retail stores, but basically decided in the end that the burden of enforcing mandatory scanning or signing in, particularly on small businesses, it would just be too hard. They say that they've focused on places where mask usage is less practical, so that's why we've seen places like cafes, bars and restaurants included.
Kristen Horner, Wellington, thank you. Well, on the eve of the government's big decision on whether to extend the lockdown, the COVID response minister gave some hint of how it may play out. Our political editor, Jessica Mackay, was at today's news conference and joins us now from Parliament. Jess, how likely is it we will see level 4 extended?
Well, it's almost certain that Auckland will stay in level 4 for longer. Those case numbers just aren't dropping down. But the minister has said that regional provinces, that we may see some boundaries in the regions that may change things. So we may see, for example, the South Island or parts of the North Island where we haven't had any cases and there's nothing in the wastewater. They may come down levels faster than places like Auckland, for example. On the flip side of that, though, it is really hard to contain Delta at level 3, so it is a bit of a balancing act. We will get an announcement here at Parliament tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and we'll be live with the latest on that.
And just a clue of what's to come, help for essential workers announced earlier today.
Yes, so people like nurses and doctors and supermarket workers and bus drivers, they will get childcare provided for free if they need it to be able to go to work. Now, there will be an approved list of carers, and one of those carers will go into someone's house to look after the child. They will just look after one family so that those bubbles don't get too big. For school-aged children as well, they are ramping up the distance learning. So a couple of signs there that level 4 isn't going away anytime soon.
All right, and yesterday you questioned officials about the speed of revealing locations of interest. Have there been any developments on that?
So locations of interest from now will be released every 2 hours on the official Ministry of Health website, and the aim is to try and give people some certainty. Over the last few days it's been coming out in dribs and drabs and it's been really hard to follow for people. They have also added in a search function which should make it a little bit easier for people to go through those hundreds of locations that are there now. This is really crucial information, so it is important that they get it right.
Indeed. Kia ora, Jess. Jessica Mackay in Parliament. As we heard earlier, 1 million New Zealanders have now been fully vaccinated. The program's ramping up further. Nearly 1,600 Aucklanders getting their jabs today at a drive-through site. And in Wellington, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield rolled up his sleeve. Yvonne Tahana with more.
He wasn't one to watch the needle go in, but happy nevertheless to get his first vaccination.
Feeling great, actually. It's really nice to have got to this point. I've been talking about the vaccine for months.
Happy too to celebrate another milestone. 1 million New Zealanders are now fully vaccinated, and the Pfizer freezer's still full.
More good news, another 382,500 doses of the Pfizer vaccine arrived in New Zealand yesterday, meaning we have over 750,000 doses on hand.
Auckland rolling out more big vaccination events like this drive-through at the airport.
Straight through, lovely staff.
So yeah, no, it's awesome.
Aotearoa is now on the cusp of a booster agreement with Pfizer.
It's at a sort of a fairly crucial stage and in a commercial stage. But again, what we're wanting to do is keep open the option of accessing either the current version of the vaccine, a new altered vaccine.
But the National Party's still criticising the rollout, saying it's shameful and the slowest in the OECD. Vaccinations in prisons stopped in June when supplies ran low, but have now resumed. One scientist says the pause was risky.
Because these are people who are living in a very densely packed environment where, if we look internationally, we've seen COVID-19 spread like wildfire through prison facilities.
Still, he's pleased with the overall shape of the rollout.
I would give the New Zealand government a good pass grade for this, because by world standards, if we vaccinate all New Zealanders by the end of the year, we'll be way ahead of most populations in the world.
We've had a really clear plan about who we're vaccinating first and why, and I think it's stood the test of time.
Time now, they say, to double efforts and protect as many as possible. Yvonne Tahana, One News.
And it wasn't just Auckland offering drive-through vaccinations. One was also set up in Christchurch. Lisa Davies is there. Tēnā koe, Lisa. It's not just for anyone, though, is it?
No, good evening, Wendy. The CDHB set up this drive-through as a trial, really, to try and speed up vaccinations for our essential workers here in Christchurch. 120 were invited to come along, and they could bring their whānau as well. It must have been a success, because I've recently been told it will be up and running again tomorrow morning, and employers of essential workers are being sent instructions to get an appointment, because not just anyone can turn up here.
And let's talk about breaches. What's the latest information on lockdown breaches across the country?
Well, Wendy, the good news is that police are thanking most of us for doing what we meant to, sticking to the rules. But unfortunately, 23 people have now been charged with breaches. Most of those are for protests, and there have been 67 formal warnings given out. But down in Wanaka, there was a group of 7 men from 6 different bubbles that were caught out by police jet boating. Obviously not what they should have been doing. Police are yet to decide what penalty they should face, and they say they have a very low tolerance for that kind of thing when people are really putting in jeopardy the safety of their loved ones and the wider community.
From Christchurch, Lisa Davies, thank you. Now, with more on locations of interest revealed daily, what are you actually meant to do if you'd been to one of those places? Well, if you were at one of those locations at the exact times and dates outlined by the Ministry of Health, you are legally required to isolate at your usual place of residence, away from other members of your household. Alert Healthline on 0800 358 5453 and advise them that you are a contact of a COVID case, and get tested for COVID-19 as soon as possible. So what about people who live with this contact, like family or flatmates? Household members are required to isolate at home until the person who's been at a location of interest or categorised as a close contact of a case has received a negative Day 5 test result. Failure or refusal to follow these directions is considered an offence. Some affected families are struggling to get access to food supplies as they face 2 weeks in isolation. Supermarkets are struggling to keep up with demand. A number of stores either closed or with restricted opening hours. As Corazon Miller reports, the community is stepping up.
Picking up the essentials, not to fill her shelves,
Only got the pans, but no Edmonds.
but helping out a local elderly resident.
We've had a massive increase in orders and people needing essentials delivered to them, which is has been a little bit overwhelming.
Volunteers are used to doing this, but not at this scale.
Personally, I've done around 10 this week, which is a lot more than what I usually do.
There are more than 8,000 contacts identified so far in this outbreak, all having to stay at home for 14 days.
People are self-isolating and having this challenge supplying themselves with food.
Community groups stepping up to help.
Just imagine that you have small children at home and you need milk. If you are meant to be isolating and you have no other option,
you would probably look at breaking the rules and go outside. But we don't want anyone to have to do that.
400 Countdown staff are in isolation after being exposed to COVID across 13 stores in Auckland and Wellington. Several sites are now closed. Of those that remain open, many have restricted hours, and as can be seen here, slots for the delivery of online shopping is fully booked for the foreseeable future. Making it tough for families like these, her eldest was at 2 locations of interest.
Our landlord and my in-laws are normally the ones that organise food for us. However, my landlord is now isolated as well due to being at a place of interest on Saturday. And my father-in-law is limiting how much he goes out due to the fact that my mother-in-law is also immune compromised.
Today she got a delivery from the Student Volunteer Army.
However, due to stock issues, a lot of it was missing. We're having a little bit of trouble getting a hold of the foods that we know our little boy will eat, as he's also autistic, so he's very particular.
Isolated shoppers being encouraged to explore their options and reach out for help to get through. Corazon Miller, One News.
Well, wastewater testing is ramped up as a number of COVID cases rises across the country. Areas tested cover 3.7 million New Zealanders. So how does it actually work? Katie Stevenson explains.
Another tool in our defence against COVID-19. Staff at this wastewater treatment plant in Christchurch gearing up.
Wastewater is not a particularly nice substance to be around, so we have normal health and safety protocols, wearing glasses, wearing gloves, wearing protective coveralls.
One of dozens across the country now on the hunt for the virus.
We've been collecting samples for wastewater analysis for about 18 months now.
It's then taken to a government research centre to be studied.
We know that people who have COVID do end up excreting it down the toilet.
Scientists likening the process to following a recipe.
Step 1 is to remove the water. Step 2 is to take what's left and get rid of everything that isn't RNA, which is similar to DNA. Step 3 is to take just a few strands of RNA and to amplify them. And then step 4 is to feed that into a machine.
So far in this latest outbreak, the Delta strain has been detected in water in Auckland, Wellington and Warkworth, with testing ramping up and happening in more areas.
Where we have an area of special interest, such as the Coromandel, we might test there, whereas we wouldn't normally do that during our routine surveillance.
Taking all precautions to ensure New Zealand leaves no stone unturned to stamp out the deadly virus. Katie Stevenson, One News.
FI Akane next, hellish scenes outside Kabul airport.